developer Capcom makes its Switch 2 debut with a stellar conversion of Street Fighter 6, while also giving us our first sighting of the RE engine on the system. The bottom line is that for Street Fighter fans, this is the complete package. A pure 60 frames per second experience for its classic 1 vs 1 fighting, with every mode intact from rival platforms. In fact, this Switch 2 edition is authentic to the point that it has online crossplay with all other consoles plus PC, and it even qualifies as tournament legal for 2025's Capcom Pro Tour. With that being said, its visual settings are adjusted owing to it running on a mobile NVIDIA Tegra T239 chipset, with some compromises along the way. So, in comparison, just where does Switch 2 slot in between base PS4, Xbox Series S, and even PS5? And what's the state of its performance between the Fighting Ground, World Tour single-player adventure, and Battle Hub online lobbies? Let's find out. Let's talk about the new features first, quickly. Having Street Fighter 6 in portable form is a success on its own, but Capcom has had a stab at custom tailoring the game for Switch 2 hardware as well. There's amiibo support, an option for wireless multiplayer between two nearby consoles, plus a pair of new modes in the Fighting Ground area called Gyro Battle and Calorie Contest. To be blunt, I doubt most players will select these more than once or twice out of passing curiosity before returning to the classic Street Fighter modes. Both modes demand tilting a sideways oriented Joy-Con left and right to move, while vigorously shaking the Joy-Con triggers a random attack. It's a throwaway novelty extra, essentially, calling to mind the waggle controls of Nintendo Wii ports in its heyday. Still, ultimately, these modes are entirely optional and don't detract from the quality of the core package. Okay, on with the tech analysis then. In terms of image quality, Switch 2 punches well above its weight. While docked under a TV, the game renders at a fixed native 960x540 resolution, with Nvidia's DLSS upscaler reconstructing this base pixel structure to 1080p. There is no dynamic resolution scaling in place here, but even so, DLSS is surprisingly effective in taking a rather low 540p figure and, for the most part, converting it to a respectable result. There are limits, of course. Aliasing and flicker are in sight where characters reveal the background for a few frames, leaving that raw pixel count in view. It's a win on balance though, and Switch 2's use of DLSS tends to give it an edge over even Xbox Series S in overall sharpness and image stability. For context, Series S renders at a native 1080p, but uses Capcom's in-house upscaler, where Switch 2's approach, by comparison, is simply more adept in handling noise, aliasing, and flicker. Despite the lower 540p base pixel structure, distant building details in stages like Tian Hong Yuan resolve more logically on Switch 2, avoiding the more obvious breakup seen on Series S. Image quality, even in motion, tends to favour Switch 2. Visual noise across materials like Zangief's glossy spandex outfit are cleaned up, while hair, like Dalsim's beard, feature less dithering artifacts. Hair elements are still prone to obvious noise, sadly, and this remains an area of weakness for Capcom's RE engine in general, but it is minimised, at least on Nintendo's platform. Of course, PS5's 4K image sets the gold standard in side-by-side shots, but the fact Switch 2 is outperforming Series S is clearly a huge win in itself. My final point here is that the use of DLSS makes the Switch 2 release of Street Fighter 6 rather unique. As an official upscaling option, DLSS is missing on the PC version right now, despite its appearance in more recent RE Engine PC titles like Dragon's Dogma 2. Street Fighter 6's original release predates its arrival on RE Engine, but given the results here on Switch 2, it'd clearly be a great addition for Nvidia GPU users. In comparison, it's impossible to ignore certain other visual tweaks on Switch 2. The good news is that Switch 2's texture quality is superior to Series S, with skin, clothing, and stage floors boasting higher resolution texture maps. Everything from Chun-Li's Chong Sam to the pores on each character's face show a huge disparity in asset quality. The 9GB of usable RAM on Switch 2 is put to effective use, though on a more critical note, it might be more accurate to call this a shortfall for Series S, given it's got 8GB of usable RAM itself to work with. It's unclear why Series S continues to fall so far behind in this area.
Indeed, in a broader comparison, Switch 2's texture setting is often closer to base PS4's, while inevitably it runs at a lower preset than PS5.
It's a good result, though Switch 2 does, however, miss out on two other settings present on the PS5 release. Using Ryu's finishing move as an example, there's a lack of subsurface scattering, simulating the layers of a skin's membrane to diffuse oncoming light. Instead, the texture across Ryu's face and arm present in a raw, unfiltered fashion on Switch 2 with a pin-sharp but coarse end result. Secondly, much like on PS4 and Series S, Switch 2 lacks the muscle deformation effect, which allows the veins on Ryu's bicep to pop out from under the skin as it flexes. The subsurface scattering and muscle deformation settings are completely superfluous to gameplay, of course, but seemingly these are reserved for PS5, Series X, and PC's higher settings. A few other cutbacks on Switch 2 bear mention, some of which you may have spotted already. In summary, the depth of field effect is disabled, background NPCs are set to the standard setting, as opposed to the optional crowded setting on PS5, and shadows also take a visible hit on Switch 2, with more visible dithering at their edges. Physics-based particles are also non-interactive on Switch 2, and so the confetti on the Colosseo stage floor, for example, does not react to character movement. Finally, screen space reflections, SSR, are also removed during typical fighting ground matchups. On stages like Genbu Temple, this means that no reflection is drawn on the lake in the background, which again puts Switch 2 in line with the last-gen PS4 release. In fairness, SSR isn't hugely missed here. On Series S, X, and PS5, Street Fighter VI's use of SSR has issues with occlusion artifacts as fighters obscure the reflection source, but it is equally odd to see water go without it. Incidentally, the World Tour and Battle Hub modes do have SSR engaged, and in each case, all those occlusion issues are clear to see on Switch 2. Crucially, these visual tweaks are never game-breaking. While docked, Switch 2 still puts out a great-looking take on Street Fighter VI with all its core mechanics in place. Switch 2 in its portable mode sticks to this very same principle. It's a robust 60 frames per second experience, but achieving 60 FPS while on lower GPU clocks does demand further visual cutbacks. Firstly, portable play drops to a fixed 640 by 360 resolution with DLSS reconstructing that to 720p. Flipping between Switch 2 in portable and docked states, ambient occlusion is also removed in portable mode, stripping out shading around the scene and both fighters. This results in a general loss in depth, and ultimately creates a lighter appearance to the scene while in portable play. Beyond this, the changes are much more subtle. Lighting quality is lowered, meaning projectiles no longer cast light to the floor as they move across the stage. Alongside the removal of ambient occlusion, this puts Switch 2's portable mode closer to base PS4 overall. Finally, volumetric effects like haze and fog, notably in the beach stage, are removed too, in this case resulting in an entirely different hue in portable mode. Of course, Street Fighter VI offers more than just the classic face-offs of the fighting ground, and we also get the Yakuza-esque World Tour mode, plus the Battle Hub lobby. Each of these modes keeps the same resolutions on Switch 2, a 540p upscale to 1080p while docked, and a 360p upscale to 720p in portable mode. Sadly, both modes are less polished in their visual delivery overall. Just as with PS4 and Series S, exploring the open city reveals a host of odd technical choices, like glaring NPC pop-in around the main square area and visibly lowered frame rates on characters at a fixed range. As a result, you'll see NPCs in the background run at around 20 FPS or so. In terms of image quality, aliasing treatment on hair is rather limited, while power cable lines overhead struggle to resolve correctly on Switch 2, again leaving behind plenty of aliasing. And finally, SSR, as mentioned, has no elegant fallback for moments where the reflected scenery falls out of screen space, causing very obvious occlusion artifacts around the player. It must be stressed that Switch 2 isn't alone in presenting these problems. Rather, it inherits them from the other console releases, and most of these rough points apply to the Battle Hub mode as well. Back to the good news. Testing Street Fighter VI's frame rate is as straightforward as can possibly be. Switch 2's lock at 60 frames per second is absolutely perfect in the fighting ground mode at least, and there isn't much to report here otherwise. Through all the visual cutbacks on Switch 2, Capcom makes the right call in prioritizing performance over everything else. Every one of those 60 frames within a second is crucial and form an integral part of Street Fighter VI's internal logic in timing an input, blocking, or parrying. In docked play, we get a consistent 60 FPS throughout, and likewise, judging by eye owing to a lack of direct capture for frame rate analysis, portable play on Switch 2 is similarly robust. Even with its further visual downgrades while off the dock, the game is optimized well in the single aspect that matters most. The only exception, to nitpick, is the brief drops to around 45 FPS during the pre-fight hype sequences. Not that this affects controllable play once a stage loads. Less impressive is the state of the World Tour mode. Performance is sadly an afterthought in this case, with travel around the city running entirely unlocked on Switch 2. Cutscenes and free roaming run at 30 to 60 FPS, which never feels great, especially without VRR support available to TVs in docked mode. Worse still, any encounter with enemies takes you to a side-on battle view which caps all play to 30 FPS. This is entirely at odds with Street Fighter's historical focus on 60 FPS play. Alas, the Battle Hub mode falls prey to the very same problem in its roaming around, with a 40 to 60 FPS readout causing judder, especially so on a busy server filled with avatars. All of this applies to Switch 2's portable play as well, and while it potentially feels smoother owing to VRR, which I can't confirm 100%, there are still visible drops as it wavers between 40 to 60 FPS. Much like the last-gen PS4 version then, Switch 2 struggles to deliver either of these modes at the slick, smooth frame rate we're seeing in the core game, whereas, for reference, Series S has much of these modes running at 60 FPS. A word on input latency and the game's support of 120Hz. Simply put, Switch 2 does not have the input delay reduction mode toggle seen on other consoles, but the game does swap to 120Hz output if set at a system level. It's not clear if IDR is engaging or not here, which is frustrating given that it is effective in lowering latency on PS5 and Series X. Either way, based on findings by latency expert Nigel Woodall, whose archive of results are linked on X, Switch 2's input latency is reduced by around 50 milliseconds while running at 120Hz. Effectively, this shaves off 3 frames of delay compared to 60Hz play, so it's well worth switching. The level of responsiveness is competitive with PS5 overall, and while Switch 2 has slightly higher latency, by a matter of 1 to 2 frames in both the 60 and 120Hz modes, it's unlikely to be noticed by most outside the pro scene. Speaking more generally about how the 120Hz mode works, all visuals are identical to the 60Hz mode. As on other consoles, Switch 2 also caps gameplay at 60 frames per second within its 120Hz feed. There are occasional frame pacing irregularities, but they don't manifest often in actual play, and the payoff in input response is the right trade-off. Expectedly, the frame rate behavior in the World Tour and Battle Hub modes remain as they were, in the 40 to 60 FPS region, and with the same 30 FPS during World Tour battles. All round, Street Fighter VI on Switch 2 is a strong effort from Capcom. Despite some gimmicky extra modes and a wobbly 40 to 60 FPS performance readout in the World Tour and Battle Hub segments, the classic Street Fighter VI action is perfectly intact at 60 FPS. Whether played in docked mode or portable, Switch 2 delivers in this crucial aspect. Perhaps most remarkable is the fact that image quality edges out Xbox Series S, with DLSS once again proving to be a magic bullet in optimizing for a less power-hungry mobile chipset. The other chops and changes to Switch 2's visuals, the cutbacks in shadow detail, depth of field, SSR, and particle effects, are also ultimately trivial in light of the main achievement here, that the core mechanics of Street Fighter VI translate so smoothly. The only final point is that HDR is not supported here, though this is still surprisingly the case for all other versions of the game. Switch 2 then is a viable way to enjoy Capcom's latest fighter, and it's above all a convincing first foray for the developer's RE engine on the console. But that's all from me today. If you did enjoy this video, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell for instant notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video and many more, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch directly, you know where to find me. But from me for now, thanks for watching.